Hello, and welcome to Sustainability Roundtable on Global TV, where these ideas and action and challenges are transformed into tomorrow's solution. Welcome, my name is Eric Adile, and I have also with me here Chief Emeka Okengu. Welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
Every conversation on this platform is not theoretical, it is deeply human. It is the story of the farmer displaced by flood in Kogi, the graduate without job in Enugu, the traders battling rising price in Lagos, the young innovator searching for opportunities in Kano. These are not isolated cases. They are the lived realities of our times and millions of Nigerians. My guest today, Dr. Emeka Okengu, is a development economist, the CEO of Ant Hill Concept Limited, Abuja. He's a globally renowned consultant on national strategies, development. He's also the patron of the International Human Rights Commission, Geneva, for African region. Dr. Okengu holds the traditional title of Ipibe Wepa Wano from Esako East local government area, Edo State. And he's also the Ikenga of Oru Ahera in Imo State. Sir, you're welcome.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir. Today, on Sustainability Roundtable, we confront one of the most urgent questions of our time. How do we move millions of Nigeria from vulnerability to opportunity? Nigeria is a nation of promise, young, creative, resource-rich, resilient. Yet, every day, millions wake up unsure of their next meal, uncertain about their safety, and fearful of their future. From soaring food prices in Lagos to flood-displaced farmers in Benue State, to jobless graduates in Port Harcourt, Abuja, and Kano, vulnerability is no longer a statistics. It is a daily struggle around the world. Countries with far fewer resources have lifted millions out of poverty through strategic leadership, inclusion, inclusive growth, and collective actions. Nigeria has the capacity to do the same. Yet, too many of our people remain trapped, leaving the one shocked away from poverty. Today, we explore how government, business, and communities can come together to build real pathways that transform hardship into hope, vulnerability into resilience, and struggle into sustainable opportunity. The time to act is now, and that's why we are here. Global vulnerability has become a defining challenges of our time, from climate-induced displacement in Asia to job losses in Europe to food insecurity across part of Africa. No society is immune, but vulnerability is not just about poverty, it is about risk, exposure, and lack of resilience. Exactly what we are talking about. Vulnerability remains living below a dangerously closed the poverty line. It means unstable income, no saving, weak access to healthcare, poor housing and insecurity, and constant exposure to economic, climate, and security shocks. Vulnerability in Nigeria is structural. It is the result of the decade of underinvestment in human capital, weak diversification of economy, and failure to build systems that protect citizens from shocks. Until we fix system, vulnerability persists. In Nigeria, vulnerability is driven by high unemployment and underemployment, rising inflation and cost of living, insecurity and internal displacement, climate shock destroying agricultural farms, weak infrastructure and energy access, limited access to quality and health and credit. Sir, as a development economist and global strategy expert, how do you interpret in Nigerian current context vulnerability?
Well, you've given a lot of meat to it, but I think one very major factor that you didn't factor in, or major variable that you didn't factor in, is statistics. Because you use the word very loosely, millions of Nigerians. Now, when you're trying to now develop a vulnerability index, okay, what you have done is to do a perception. That where you want to now put it into, real time, you will need to put faces to those numbers. And the only way you can begin to put faces to those numbers is to be able to do proper classification. Okay, that is to be able to identify everybody by location, by sex, by age, by education, and then against these factors, you can now begin to now place them against what you call your vulnerabilities. Because the word vulnerability, if used loosely, can be generic. Okay, but you need to now juxtapose it against, real issues. It's not everybody that is vulnerable to every kind of thing. And it's important that I also say in this starting so that we can build this, context well. There are infrastructure that might be social. The same infrastructure could be critical. Okay, so, and part of the major demand or part of the major measurement of vulnerability, okay, would basically be access to some of this infrastructure, okay, access to health infrastructure, transport infrastructure, food sufficiency, if you may, because I think you mentioned all of this. Yeah. So you asked for a meaning of vulnerability, is that not it?
Yes.
Now, I've tried to say to you, even the richest can be vulnerable.
Yeah.
Okay, even the most secure can also be vulnerable. We are all vulnerable to insecurity. So no matter how rich or poor you are, that vulnerability is there. So it is all about, first, event, second, situation, okay, third, now, what you now call in climate, because I'm sure we're going to get there, your mitigation and your adaptation strategies, to be able to now look at this, maybe the ones that are now induced, by climate change.
Okay. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much. Okay, leaders also must be collective. Government set the vision, business bring investment, and the communities drive ownership. Then poverty is not defeated by slogan. Poverty can never be defeated by slogan. It is defeated by system. Population vulnerability is increasing despite Nigeria's immense resources. And from what you've said, statistics. And now, who should take lead in reversing this trend in Nigeria? There's a trend that statistics is, we don't pay attention to statistics. It's just a high-sounding language. Talk is more easier than doing the actual work. Who should take the lead further in reversing this trend?
Maybe the first and the most important government, and that is the government of the household. That's very important.
Yeah.
Okay. You must be able to lift your hand before somebody can pull you out. So I think the first mistake we've made, or we're making generally as Africans, because I remember one of the presidents of America that said, do not ask for what America can do for you, ask for what you can do for America. And like I said, the beginning point is to be able to give that identity to somebody, okay, before you can begin to now see what else you do. So starting will be from, you talked about community ownership, and then you also need to give a definition to community. Sometimes when people talk about community, what comes into mind is when you go to your village. Okay, this office here is a community.
Yeah.
All right, this studio is a community. Where you live is a community. So many places can form communities, and I can start from here. Walking into this studio now, you guys who are staff here might decide, okay, fine, it might be good to have a coffee corner. Okay, and if a good decaf coffee is 10,000 naira, I had 20 people, who are working here, and every person was contributing maybe 50 naira, maybe 100 naira, maybe 200 or something. We can actually buy coffee, buy the decks, and then do a coffee, and it helps.
Yeah.
Okay, we could have, and I'm just trying to tell you how these things are built, so that people tend to think that government is the open and end. No. You get, and this is why the argument is that you get the leadership that you want. Okay, you get the leadership that you desire.
Yeah.
Because what people in leadership positions actually do is to pursue policies. Okay, you had mentioned the private sector bringing investments, and then I don't know, people now bringing in participation and all that. Now, so you must be ready. You must get yourself ready to be able to participate, in a system that you need to reward you. And this is why some people will waste a lot of time putting their children through school, and sometimes I'm certain that you must have had that dragging to school very early in one cold morning, and then remember that you that is complaining that your mother had probably woken you up with a slap or a kick or something, your mother needs to be awake for that to happen. And then it's not only you she's scattering. So point I'm trying to make is that in trying to build an inclusive society, it has to be bottom up. Okay, if you're able to create that bottom-up approach, it becomes a lot easier for you to now create what you call minimums. And it is in these minimums that you now begin to now create, your recruitment ethics and standards. Okay, you don't see a guy who throws money at you and you want to entrust him, becoming anything near your public post. Okay, because you actually appreciate that you need somebody who understands it, that round peg in that round hole, for things to be done right. So I need to take this argument of, it's so simplistic, like you've put it. Who should lead the charge? You are leading the charge in your home, aren't you? Yeah. Okay, you're sitting that way, madam, to say, okay, this is what we earn, this is what we can spend, this is what we can do, that is what we can do. That's the very primary and the most elementary component of building up. But having said that, it is not also the exclusive preserve of that person. Government also owes you, some level of responsibility, because part of what it is you do is that you're paying your tax, and they're empowered to be able to now take some certain decisions, especially three major ones. The first one will be security of lives and property. That's very, very central and key. That's the primary responsibility duty that government owes you. Okay. The second will now be social infrastructure, that can now either be critical, depending, or social, if you may. And the third, will be probably, managing, your resources. You also talked about Nigeria, having abundant resources. Again, if you were to also drill that down, you might find a lot of red or fault lines. You might have resources, but they mean nothing. And this is why they say to you, what is power without control? Okay, you could have, there are places that have all the whole gold in the whole world, and then the people who are there have no idea of what it means, what it could be used for, what value that can be added to it. If we have time to go into that, that is where your skills, as a human being. So there are two components to it: what society brings and what you're also bringing to the table.
Yes, thank you very much. Your response has really placed enormous responsibility on each and every one of us, especially the families and the community, like you said, the communities that we belong to. But I still want to ask, what must both government, the business, and the community do differently now for us to save this growing trend?
Well, the first thing that you must do differently is that you must know who you're planning for. You don't plan in the sky. Okay, I give this very typical example. You don't use a party pot to cook a pot of rice. Okay, and then you don't use the small steam pot to cook a bag of rice. All right, two things are going to happen. So what's important again is that you must be statistical and mathematical in your planning.
Yes,
that's the first thing. Now, because against population, you cannot begin to plan your energy. You can begin to plan your water resources. You can begin to plan your housing. You can begin to plan your transport. You can begin to plan your education services. You can begin to plan your medical facilities.
Yeah.
Now, so the first and most important component, okay, that government must do is that you must be able to do proper statistical, aggregation of your people, because it's only against that you can begin to now map. Then the second mapping you need to do is to map your natural resources, like you mentioned. And when you talk about natural resources, there's also this story, and it's very important to note this, that some people value water more than they value gold. Okay? Yeah. So in the desert, when they hit water, it has more value
than gold.
Than diamonds. Do you understand what I'm saying? So everything that is a resource, laterite, which we take for granted, is a resource. All right? In fact, there's even a story that I'm reading about some guy who went and captured the rainwater in his house in one of the states in America, and the state came and said, you can't use the water. And he says, but I got this for free, but they say you're living here. But not going to that extreme means that you need to be methodological, okay, in also now capturing your natural resources. But then the third and another very important component, you're looking for solutions on how you can build this, will be your technologies, okay, because the difference between the rich and poor nations is actually what they do, okay, with their natural resources, okay, with their valuable human capital. So in developing your human capital, you must be able to develop your skills, because there are two kinds of capital. There's administrative capital, which unfortunately a lot of people carry around now. Okay, you have PhDs in courses that can only fit into administrative jobs. Then, but you also now have certifications, which are not degrees, that are equally, if not more important. Yeah. Okay, which now keeps the engines of your economy running. Yeah. You have somebody who has a PhD in electrical engineering. He's not trained to wire cars, unfortunately. And this is another mistake people make. Oh, you have a PhD, you can't even... He is trained, to be able to write codes, to be able to design electrical systems, not to basically begin to touch one end of the wire and then find out where power or whatever. Now, what this means is that your skill level is also very critical and central. So in planning a society, you need to be measured. That's the point I'm trying to make, so that you just don't come and say, okay, government, you owe me A, B, C, D. Yes, they do owe you that, okay, based on the provisions of your constitution. But like I said, the primary and the most important is the safety of your life and properties. Yes. Okay, so every other person also has a role, a contribution to make in all this. But I guess the question you'll be asking me is now, how do you get access? How do we now all, come into this thing to begin to make these contributions? But I hope it comes up. If it does, I'll give you my insights.
Yes, that's the next question. Because we need to, everybody comes in, that's the collective action we are talking about. Now, when we talk about issue of sustainability, because everybody is now affected, and not even just in Nigeria, but across the globe. Whatever affects Nigeria today is also an issue in UK in the morning tomorrow. Whatever happened in Nigeria today is an issue in Washington the next day. How do we activate collective action to ensure that?
Well, first and foremost, you see, the world has come to this realization that we actually live in a global village. Okay, so first and foremost, there's globalization before you now have your climate crisis or your climate change. Yeah. And then that is bringing to the fore the need for you to now start, creating what they call, some people call it the New World Order. Yeah. Some other people call it the mitigation and adaptation, strategy. So it simply means, how do we live with this our new realities, okay, in the age of high-tech technologies. Yeah. So the first thing you need to do, and this is the thinking that your administrative or national structure needs to think through, is what position do we occupy in what they call the politics of international economic and social relations. Okay, what skills are we bringing to the table? Now, this is where you talk about competitiveness. Now, this is where you talk about self-sufficiency. Okay, this is where you can get food security and food sufficiency. Now, in also doing so, you also don't wish it. It's a lot of hard work. Okay, if I take you back to the days you had the foreign people running our show here, they were very measured in whatever it was they were doing. If they wanted to do cocoa, they didn't just go and start clearing land to start planting cocoa. They set up research institutions. Okay, and those research institutions was where, because you used the word sustainability, was where their seeds, their soil tests, the inputs, the human capital, needed to be able to run that operations. And of course, the aggregation systems. You just don't wake up in the morning and then plant rice, plant beans, plant this. You also has to do some level of measuring. And again, international economic relations now begins to also take the next, big step. For you to be recognized and partnered, you need to bring something to the table that every other person wants. Be it your human capital. I remember one time, and I don't even think a lot of that has changed now. If you found any good tailor in Nigeria, he was either Ghanaian or he was Senegalese. If you found anybody who was a good painter, who could do proper screeding, he wasn't Nigerian. Okay, he was Togo or somewhere. Now, if you go to those countries, you find out that they have this deliberate policy of promoting skills. Okay, at very, very, pedestrian levels, at their primary schools and all that. So that by the time somebody finishes primary school, he's almost certain, okay, of where he's going to. If he's going to be a professor, that skill is already identified, okay, or that value is already created. And I think that is where, as a country, we haven't done very well. Our education system hasn't reflected, what you might be able to call the global realities or socio-economic realities that we are living in now.
Thank you very much, sir. You made mention of two things, the intentionality. Yes, I mean, we have to be very intentional in doing what we are doing, and also how to integrate the skill building in part of our curriculum.
Yes.
I think, sir, who is responsible for this? Because, like what you said, the reality is that most of our certificates makes us more vulnerable. The more you acquire this education, the more certificate you acquire, the more vulnerable you become. How do we solve this problem?
Well, it's a two-way thing. The first challenge is you. The second challenge is somebody you've chosen. Yeah. Okay, because like somebody says, there's no way you pay peanuts and you won't get monkeys. Okay, if your recruitment process does not bring out the best, okay, if it is laced with nepotism, favoritism, tribalism, and all the zims that are negative, if you're not bringing your first 11 forward and you are being very political, very sectional in trying to, do your public recruitment, definitely there won't be any social contract. There won't be any fears, okay, of any kind of pushback. Okay, and if you're doing elections, which has become some kind of norm now, and then you need to now get into any kind of gratification, be it even, buying biscuits, be it even buying water for whatever is what. Okay, you might also be selling a little bit of your conscience, because if you want to do the maths, let's even assume that all that candidate has shared is pure water. Okay, that sells for 10 naira, and he has shared 2 million. That money needs to be recovered from somewhere, and if you just oppose that amount of money against the salary is going to be earning in 4 years or 5 years, you might find out that you can't get it back. Just only pure water. I've not talked about bottled water. I've not even talked about cash. So the first thing that it is the citizens' right to say, we don't mind who you are, where you come from, but we are going to be recruiting you based on your capacity to be able to do A, B, C, D. Okay, and then kick in or call in that recall, clause when that person is not meeting up to expectations. You see that public officers, who you recruit will do the right thing. Nigeria operated that way before. Now, the second thing is that you must be very intentional about your food systems. That's very, very important, because anybody who's not able to feed himself, any nation that cannot feed himself is very, very insecure. Okay, and then third, we must be globally competitive. And in this global competitiveness is where you set standards that you must meet. Okay, in some countries, especially the UK, what you don't want to hear in a shop is a customer telling you that this is unacceptable. Okay, some nations run on justice, some run on mercy. And any nation that runs on mercy, unfortunately, is one that says, oh, please forgive him, he's Satan, he's God. But the one that runs on justice will say, no, what you have done is wrong. And then, there's a price to pay. So the moment you insist on those basics that must happen, then it becomes a lot easier for you to, be a judge and jail your wife or your son or your friend, okay, because that friend has done wrong. And then nobody comes to say to you, oh, Eric, I remember your relationship with him. And that is, the mantra now becomes, if you do crime, be sure you're going to do time. So it's not a one-way balance. You don't blame whatever government, and that's why I started by saying that the first government is your house. Okay, and some of us run those governments very badly. Okay, if you see a child or children who turn out badly, 60% of the causes can be traced immediately to their nuclear homes. Either you have a man who says, that's my son, you can't discipline him. When we were growing up, one of the worst people you didn't want visiting your home, especially if you had done something wrong, was your class teacher. Okay, if you go to school and you go late, no matter what the excuse was, you get the flogging of your life before you gave the excuse. Okay, so it made us, it was easier for you to get a slap or a kick from your mom, and then you're off to school. So it taught you discipline.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying? This is not what we're teaching our children. I remember way back in those days, our television started by 4 in the evening, and after network news by 9 o'clock, it was shut off and everybody went to bed. You were not allowed, to do anything before then. After this, you call on break. So that's what it is.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're still on Sustainability Roundtable on Global TV. I will go for a short break and then we'll join us back. Thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. Welcome back. You know, still with me here is Dr. Emeka Okengo, and he's been sharing a lot of insight on the level of vulnerability, what is involved, especially he laid emphasis on statistics, which is a major problem in Nigeria, and the statistics remain a key problem in Nigeria. I remember when Lagos State decided to take the bull by the horn and then did their own head count. I got a citizen card of residence in Lagos, and by that card, if you go to hospital, they say you are counted, so they've planned for you. There's a policy, and I think that was a very big achievement for the state. But looking at what you say, sir, on the skill set and the growing vulnerability, what you've said, and the leadership, the skills, and every other thing, I felt, I also stand to be corrected, that is it that the government is, or big business is keeping the people, the majority of the population, in a vulnerable state so that their voice won't be heard, to silence them or to keep them low? Because the people are not talking. Even the worst affected, silence has become a very major challenge in pulling people out of vulnerability. How do you think we can resolve this, sir? Or who is responsible for this?
First, you can't give what you don't have, and it's important you note that. Second, you can also start from the roof. You must be able to build a foundation. Yeah. So the first thing you need to do is to be able to assemble the best of your minds, to build a blueprint. And if you remember what happened after the Second World War, the United States appointed some guy they call General Marshall. Okay, that's how you got the Marshall Plan. Yeah. And they now developed that Marshall Plan, to be able to now rebuild war-torn Germany. First, Marshall wasn't a German; he was an American general. And second, he got the best there was to be able to now take Germany out of the debris. Now, the second place that you could also now align to this kind of critical thinking is New York. At one time, New York was just one very big slum. And then the government got an architect to say, okay, fine, you know what, let's make this place more livable. And they did a lot of surgical, pulling of New York. Let's bring it to Abuja now. Abuja, again, was one of the most planned cities at the point in time, that it became the federal capital. Yeah. Lawns, greens, forestry reserves, et al. But what is very critical to also creating vulnerability is keeping to the standards and keeping to the master plan. Because if you distort it, okay, you could distort a lot of things. Yes. Abuja, if I'm right, wasn't planned for more than 5 million people. I think the maximum population, that the infrastructure was planned was for 5 million. But because of forced migration, influx of people into the city, you now started seeing slums, springing all over the place. And these slums now demanded new infrastructure. They demanded, some certain aspects being put together. And if you don't have an understanding, and that's what I'm saying to you, that in building systems and building societies, you must bring the people with the knowledge. Yeah. Okay. It is one thing for you to be gifted in GAB. It's another thing for you to be knowledgeable in planning. Yeah. Now, this is very important, and has played some, in my view and opinion, some very negative role, in what we are facing today. So this is where you might be able to now start looking at your public administration structures. Do you have the right people? If you have the right people, do you have the right instruments? If you have the right instruments, do you have the right monitoring and evaluation systems? If you do you have the right, legal frameworks that can now enforce, compliance? All right. So it's just not that easy. It's a long chain of demands, that needs to be met and kept. And this is why, if you want to solve a problem, Yes, some people will say to you, the fish, starts rotting at the head. But that does not exclude the fact that the injury could also be at the tail of the fish. Okay, so it's important. You just we're not fixated on, okay, it's government. No, not. All of us must be able to think, have what you call a think through, attitude to solving the problem.
I think, I don't know, in your own view, sir, how has Nigerians implemented the United Nations has a clause that they put together, understanding the issue of the growing issue of vulnerability. They come up with that clause, leaving no one behind. What, to your own understanding, does this concept of leaving no one behind even understood in Nigeria?
Well, if I'm a Nigerian and understand it, then it will be unfortunate and wrong to say we don't understand.
We don't understand.
Because you're a Nigerian, like I'm a Nigerian, and I think you understand it.
Okay, is it being understood by those that are supposed to implement it?
Okay, are those that are supposed to implement it equipped to understand it? You see, this is, like I said, you can't give what you don't have. All right, so, and this is why from time to time, I don't know if they still do it in most government offices. Now, when you're recruited, there's a lot of capacity building for you so that you can understand, the rules, how the process is. I don't know if that is still happening now. But understand or not understand, what is key and what is principal is that the only way you can be able to even start understanding what that thing means is that you have a compendium where if they put your name, and this is where they have the social security number. Okay, remember one time in America, Joe, a plumber, became the national issue in a presidential election. Okay, so that Joe the plumber was able to be identified because he is in the social register. Now, thus far, I don't think we've been able to go beyond 13 states in building our own social registers. I don't even think we've made up 30 states. If we have, I don't know how inclusive those social registers are. Now, that's something that used to happen in our time growing up because birth and death was a given. Okay, and the moment you were born, you were registered, and the moment you died, a certificate was also issued. But we've not been able to make that system interoperable. Okay, there's no way you can go to now and go into a national database and then type in the name of a farmer.
Yeah.
And it shows up. Okay?
Yeah.
Even your licensing, there's no way you can commit a traffic offense now and then you go to a bank and then we have not been able to inter-operationalize our data systems. That's also very, very key. And that's what I'm saying to you, that technology has a lot of role in actually addressing vulnerability. Because it is so easy to say, okay, leave no one behind. Okay, who is the no one? Who is he? How many security guards do we have in Abuja? How many unemployed people do we have in Abuja? How many transformers do we have in Abuja? Okay? You might be shocked that you ask the people who are supposed to know and they might not know it. Now, because even if they do, it's not been that, interlinked. It's not been that synergized that it now becomes, you move out of Abuja now, like in most countries of the world, as you're moving to a new state, it becomes very obvious. They have moved into that state. Your license plate tells it all. You can't even get into a new apartment if it's not tied to your car numbers. Why? Because when you commit a traffic offense, nobody starts except it's a high-speed chase.
Yeah.
Okay, where there's a crime they're trying to stop. Otherwise, they'll let you go. And by the time you're parking at your gate, a ticket is either waiting in your mailbox or under your door.
Yeah.
Why is that so? Because the moment you take that car number, everything about the guy, shows up. So transferability of such assets now means that whoever it is that owns it at the point in time they own it, is tied to his residence.
Yeah.
Now, this is again where, like I said to you, you can talk about everybody. Now, when you're talking about masses are faceless people.
Yeah.
All right? Citizenry, okay, is where you have everybody, registered and then can be identified.
Thank you very much. You really made a point. How can we, who is the question you ask, who is the one leaving behind? They leave no one behind. The no one that we are leaving behind. And it's all boiled down back to statistics. And we've got it wrong. And it's a very interesting thing that in Nigeria, for us to actually lift or solve this problem of vulnerability, statistics is key. It's been established, and like we've heard from the Chief Okengu, the issue of vulnerability can never be solved, because leaving no one behind, like they said, it can work for communities that have the statistic. They know where the poor person is living. Everybody that is vulnerable, they know where they have their statistics. They know the state of anybody. They know the status of their citizen. In Nigeria, we didn't know the status of our citizen, and nobody knows, and nobody can actually do something. But in this, in Sustainability Roundtable, is a place that we call for collective actions for us. We're articulating this platform as a global village square for collective actions, so that we can be able to reach out to the people that are responsible for this, so that they will be able to do something about it. And Asa, who do you think in the first instance should be responsible for leading this collective action, so that we can be able to move? Because the majority of the affected are silenced majority that cannot say anything. They don't even know their right. They accept it the way it comes.
You have said it's easy. You have started it. You have started building this advocacy. What's important is that you don't lay any blames if you want to build.
Yeah.
Okay, because the moment you want to push it at anybody, what the person does is that if he doesn't know what you're talking about, he pulls a veil. Okay, that veil can be either fear or anger.
Yeah.
If it's fear, you scare him, he runs. If it's anger, he attacks you, and you get nothing. But if you start from what it is you're doing now, which is a good thing, and identify all those people, and then start building roundtables to say, okay, fine, we don't have anybody in this room that we're blaming, but we're blaming all of us. Okay, now how do we begin? Now it is called starting right. The starting right is to say we don't need to have a national census for us to know how many we are. We can know how many we are within, our little communities, our housing estates. A lot of estates, have estate management committees or security committees or something within this estate where I live. Okay, I'm going to be using us as a model. How many people live here? How many people need to live here? What are the resources we have? What do we need? How is the seaway system linked? And all that. And then you begin to build from one estate to the other estate and the other estate. And in a cluster of estates, maybe 150, 60, you now have people who are living in this ecosystem. Who can be able to say, okay, fine, do you know what? We can even improve our energy systems by, using our waste to be able to do some form of energy generation, plant some food, become food sufficient. And the moment people buy this idea and they're able to actually, this is where sustainability begins to grow. You have a lot of spaces, you can do homestead agriculture and food production, rooftop agriculture and food production. And people begin to, because in your intro you were talking about community ownership. You just don't come, nobody is a community, everybody is a community. Okay, which is why there's a very popular saying where I come from, that if you have a cow that is communally owned, it usually starves to death.
Yeah.
Okay, so but if everybody now begins to see that there's a need, for some kind of responsibility to be allocated, and it is done at the best, to be able to leave those who are not so strong, help those who are not so equipped, and then give them responsibilities based on their carrying capacities. You find that if you go to a meeting now, and you probably say to the least, somebody who's supposedly unintelligent, who don't want to, naturally be part of a meeting, and then you force him to say something, and then you say, wow, you know what? This is most brilliant. And then the same thing he says, you say, okay, this is how I understand what you've said. If I'm right, please correct me. And you now put him the way, and you find out he becomes part of our meeting. Okay, a lot of people out of shyness might even want to come. So point I'm trying to make to you, Eric, is that when you want to build sustainability, it's a process.
A process.
Okay, it's a process of carrying everybody and understanding that it is not all of us that have the same, depth, okay, and experience. And the moment you're able to give respect, okay, to the least. Okay, I tell people this, that gate man in the morning when you're driving through the estate gate, just have it in mind that, oh, I'm able to sleep this night because this guy was awake. And be the first to say good morning. Hope, your night was nice. Make friends with them. Let them be part of it. There are people who also gate man. Why should I be talking to a gate man? Now, they are part of our community. And if you make them part of your community, they are very critical to now building your security architecture. Yeah. Ditto for maybe the people they call houseboys. I don't believe in it. I believe that people just have people who are helping around the house, and they are also as intelligent. If you can look at the carrying capacity of that young man, and try to do something about it. I have a boy who came to my house when he was about 20, and then he couldn't speak a word of English. But today he's on TikTok. You'll be very surprised. Okay, I insisted you can't go to school, but you must go and learn a trade. He's one of the best, welders around the estate. So the next I'm trying to do now is the moment they free him, I get him a machine, but I'm not going to be kicking him out of my house until I'm sure, he can be able to groom. And he's proud to say to people, I'm his father. So this is what we must be able to create as this inclusive society. And he's not Igbo, he's from the north. So what is important is that we must first and foremost see humankind as being equal. That's very critical. From your wife to your children, they have a say, and then you will be able to now put it together if we are building a sustainable system. And then that way you can actually now begin to put faces to numbers.
Thank you very much, sir. Now back home again, everybody is talking about the Renew Hope agenda, the Renew Hope it becomes a mantra. Every politicians, every minister, anybody want to say anything and you add the Renew Hope, it looks like you have said it's a great thing and you are doing great. Now, do you think the Renew Hope is able to accelerate poverty reduction in Nigeria in the next 4 years?
Like you said, there's no government that doesn't come with a mantra. Okay, it comes with this, call it some general wish. Yeah. There's no government also that does not mean well. But meaning well and doing well now becomes
the issue. What
you do in between.
Yeah.
There is no gainsaying that the Tinubu administration has brought some very good policies. Tough, hard, but needed. Yeah. You must recognize so. But there's also no gainsaying the fact that some of those tough policies have actually been very tough, okay, and created some level of vulnerabilities that will also require some back-end, support systems so that you can hedge people, to be able to pass through, the storm, as they were. And this is where every hand needs to get on deck. So if we're going to be getting the renewed hope to achieve its very lofty intentions, a lot has to be done at the back end. Okay, being able to harness energies, carrying capacities, and then being able to sell hope that is measurable. Okay. Because again, there's a general African proverb that says that hunger that has hope does not kill. Okay, when you have hunger and food is coming, somehow what you might feel is some little weakness and irritation, but eventually the food comes. But when you have hunger that is hopeless, that is where you start getting suicidal. So not to jump around it. Yes, the renewable can, but there needs to be a lot of, frameworking, done against it so that it is purpose-driven, it becomes measurable, it's no longer a mantra, it's not something people can just use to bander. Yeah. Okay, it now becomes something that you can, measure against milestones. Okay, milestone A to B, make certain nobody goes to bed hungry. How do you achieve this? Make certain that we enter into homestead agriculture. Make certain that we are now planning nutrition, support programs. Now, B to C, how do we now get people to move from poverty? Start sowing skills. Make certain that we return, to the days where you have the trade centers, where you can begin to now generate or create people. Level 3, now create what we call job creation partnerships, labor market agreements that now begin to now take those that you have skilled into, places, either as interns or something. At the moment you do this, you'll be very, very shocked how much it now becomes not a mantra, but a program.
Thank you very much, Chief. Thank you, sir. Like we have had today, ending vulnerability in Nigeria is not a charity. It's a strategy. And that strategy, we need it now. When government provide leadership, when business invests inclusively, when communities organize for progress, and when poverty become solvable, then opportunity becomes shared. Thank you, our distinguished guest, Dr. Emeka Okengo, for this time that you've spent with us, for your audience, and for the insightful conversation we've had today. And thank you for watching Sustainability Roundtable on Global TV. Let us build pathways to opportunities together. See you next time. Bye.